But what's really important is in every business, there is the most practical and sustainable channel for you to go into to see success. And I find a lot about building a marketing function is really just a prioritization exercise of the highest probability of success. And,
Right.
and that comes down to how much money do you have and how much internal resources you have.
With years of experience as a leader in marketing operations, Nathan Yeung helps mid-market businesses build, enhance, or support their marketing functions and drive value creation. He's a B2B SaaS marketing leader, guest lecturer, consumer psychology geek and dad, delivering companies marketing functions that become revenue engines. And he's with us today on another fantabulous episode of Startup Different. Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of Startup Different. I'm David Sinkinson. Here is Chris Sinkinson, and of course, my new friend, Nathan Yeung. How are you doing, Nathan? You're joining us remotely.
Doing great.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. We're wearing these new fun headsets. So it's kind of funny because this whole season, the studio has sort of been a new thing. But doing the call remotely in the studio is like new territory for everyone. So it's kind of fun, though. So far, I'm kind of enjoying it. Although I do think this is not the most flattering headset I could possibly have found. But anyway.
And don't wear it too long because you get a dent in your head.
Just like, like some kids have to wear those like helmet things because their heads get squished because they're on the ground too long. Anyway, it's a long story. I'm a dad, so I just worry about stupid stuff. Anyway, okay, well, thanks for joining us. I do have some notes here today, so if you see me looking down, that's what's going on. But yeah, really excited to talk to you. I want to hear all about your story, so find your audience. Obviously, your company, the big marketing firm, helping small businesses. Really interested though in your journey, how you got there. I want to know it all today. So I'm hoping you can help us through some of that.
My journey is wild. It's like not the straightest journey at all. So I trained in marketing. So I went to school here in Vancouver. I graduated and my first job was not marketing. It was actually the VP of finance in a Chinese company raising money. And
okay.
I went straight to China. And by the way, I am like the whitest Asian guy you'll ever meet. So I don't speak Chinese, but I was working in China.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
And so, and that totally kind of propelled my career. I'll be honest. I was very lucky. I totally hustled for that job. Right after that, I was kind of an operational consultant for a couple of investors. So really sitting in on some of the companies that they invested in, helping them watch their investment, helping them run the companies on a managerial perspective. And then I was a CEO for an ad technology company, and then I find myself here. So it's been kind of a wild journey. I have like 15 years worth of like C-suite experience in various different companies. I've got like 18 years of SEO. So I've been doing like SEO since I was like a kid, basically. So I was doing black hat stuff before, a lot of people even knew what that was. I was doing gray hat stuff. So I'm pretty in the know with SEO. It's kind of one of my more higher affinity technical skill sets. And then I've been running this firm for 7.5 years, and we work with a wide variety of companies. I would say 70% of our business is B2B SaaS, and then I'd say 30% is literally the wild, wild west. I'm talking national food franchises. I'm talking about real estate companies, venture capital, private equity, financial services. Like literally the 30% is just all over the place.
That's interesting. So, sometimes that makes things more complicated though, right? If you have a percentage of your customer base that's kind of like outside of what you'd like normally serve, is that like a problem for your, not that you would, not to disparage any of your customers or anything like that, but is that like something you're maybe not so wild about? How do you feel about that?
It's a massive problem, which is why 70% of the business is B2B SaaS, and we're focusing on that more or less. It doesn't stop us from taking great opportunities in other sectors. And I think what's great, and I say this with the utmost respect, is I'm so lucky. I'm privileged to be able to work in all of these industries and sectors at a senior level. And I think that's probably the biggest advantage of working with our firm is we see how marketing works differently in every single business. And it's like one of our fundamental approaches, and it's something that we can talk about later. But a lot of people think, marketing is very, very different B2B and B2C. And I go, no, the approach in marketing for every business is always the same. What's fundamentally different are the constraints. And that really relies around resourcing, distribution, things like that. So when it comes to your ideal customer profile, there'll be natural constraints that just
Right.
make it harder for you to actually capture their attention. And so therefore your approach to the market will change. So marketing is always the same. What's really different is the approach based on constraints.
That makes sense. I mean, you're trying to understand kind of the unique needs and those constraints for every single like customer you're working with. But incidentally, how many customers do you have?
So right now we have about 15 active.
Cool.
And then that doesn't include our fixed projects. So we have we produce almost a website a month,
Oh,
but
cool.
those are fixed fee type projects. So typically, what we're counting there is really our retainer. So these are clients that we're actively actually their marketing department.
Yeah, so I find this so interesting, actually. Obviously I prepare for our show and all that kind of stuff, and I was reading about you, and I find this really interesting because so like we were a B2B SaaS company. We worked with, we used to sell to higher education institutions. I did like some of the marketing, but in marketing, and this is kind of I think where you come in, but marketing kind of felt like a side of the desk. I'm more of a direct sales kind of guy, and I was really like interested in, I would exclusively think of marketing as just ways to just bring me, solid inbound leads that I or my team could sort of process. And so I wonder though, I never really thought about sort of like outsourcing it. You know what I mean? And I wonder why. You know what I mean, Chris? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think we actually did kick around the idea of like, hey, like we don't really have time to do this right. Like, but I think you had friends who worked at marketing agencies and things like that, and we weren't in their ballpark. Like we didn't have the budget that I think would support them and being able to hire them.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Nathan, is that where you guys kind of fit yourselves into this kind of equation when you talk about constraints? Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, it's literally the thesis of how we came up with this model. The thesis was really when you look at growing companies, especially in call it like the 1 to 5 million ARR mark, they're in this awkward space where they're like, hey, we need marketing. And some poor sales guy is doing it on the side of his desk, or some coordinator or junior person's doing it. And, and what you end up getting is just poor execution, right? Because there's really no one fully accountable for the role. And at the end of the day, they're not tactical experts. So you're getting inefficiencies. And then you get into this problem where you're like, okay, I can hire a manager. And what ends up happening is when you hire someone in the senior route, kind of call it the 3 to 6 year experience level, you're getting someone who understands marketing, but on a tactical and technical kind of level, they're probably going to be proficient at one or two things. So you're hiring a project manager ultimately that has 2 technical affinity skill sets, right? And everything else they're not going to do very well. So you could be lucky and you could have already justified that you have 2 technical areas where are actually economically driving you leads, call that content and SEO. So you could luck out like that. And you could be like, we've already proven now that content and SEO is bringing in an economical funnel, and our CAC ratios and all this lovely stuff is working out. Then you can go find a marketing manager who fits those 2 things and you can hire that. But a majority of companies don't have the resourcing to even prove that out. So you're hiring kind of in the hopes you're getting this mix mash that will ultimately prove out an economical funnel, which will then prove a growth kind of strategy in the future. But you're usually not there. So the whole reason you come to us is we price ourselves at that same price. So what it would cost you to hire someone with 3 to 6 years experience, you could hire just our entire team. And then as you grow, you will get access to all the different skill sets you require, whether that's creative. Our branding's terrible. You get our creative team. Whether it's like, hey, we need to figure out if SEO works. Can we start? You'll get my content team. It's like, hey, we really have paid ad strategies right now, but no one's focusing on it. You get my full-time media buyer on that, right? Oh, our website funnels and CRO isn't working. Our kind of conversion rate optimization practices aren't there. Okay, you get access to our developers. So the whole point is like the growing of your marketing function, you're going to need these technical skill sets kind of as it ebbs and flows. And you're never going to find someone that's a manager level that knows all of this, right? It's very unlikely. So then there's an economics battle, right? So this first hire is really confusing. It's like, I get this, but I don't get that. And then I get that, but I don't get this. So that's why we're priced this way. So people come to us and they go, okay, so I get a senior strategist who'll work with me like once or twice a month, and I'll get all the technical skill sets I require. This is perfect.
Right. Yeah. You know, it sounds so familiar because I think when we were about 12 staff, I think we did this.
Yeah, this happened.
We went
this
to hire,
legitimately happened. What you just described is so funny.
Where we were like, okay, let's get a marketing person in air quotes, right? And I think we interviewed people, and we would get somebody who was like super technical and knew like SEO really well.
Yep.
Okay. And like not a lot on anything else, you know, and then, and it was kind of just like that. It like you described, I think we would have been like a perfect candidate.
Well, I remember too, we had discussed with the staff that we were like, oh, we're gonna be hiring a marketing person. And I remember multiple staff being like, that's a bad idea. Like, you have no idea what you're talking about. We were like, okay. And they were actually right. I remember going deep into that process, but you're totally right. You're basically hiring like a very specific, very narrow subject matter expert. And I think the long tail of that process was going to be, we have, you know, we hired a person and they know one thing, like, oh, I better hire another person that can deal with the next thing and the next thing. And it is like the creation of the marketing department. You know what I mean? Like that's the process we were heading down towards. So it's fascinating because we were, by the way, our ARR was, I think, like 5 to about 6.5, somewhere in that range, around the time that was happening. Yeah. You know, that's right. It's actually pretty wild because I think you have, I mean, I guess it's not that surprising when you think about it, that you have your market pretty well sorted out. That's a good candidate.
I don't think we knew about any other alternatives to just going out and doing that hiring process. Like, I don't think we knew that what Nathan is doing is a thing. Do you? Like,
no,
we never contemplated that at all.
Or I would have assumed it was really, really expensive.
Yeah, I would have assumed we were going to have a truckload of money and go to a marketing agency and just like hope that we throw this money to the wind and it works.
I guess that, Nathan, that's really the question for you then. You know, am I backing up a dump truck full of money to your headquarters and hoping that you sort this problem out for me?
No, so it's not, and the whole point is that we built this so that it is economical. So generally speaking, our retainer for the full service is anywhere between like 7,500 up to like 20 a month. And if you're at the 20 mark, like, we're doing everything. Like, we're taking care of the website. We're incredibly proactive. And I really just like want to highlight that the most important way to make this work is you literally give me a budget and you give me a goal and you tell me you're going to fire me like any other employee by the end of the year. You're going to get a marketing team that will do a good job. So I think a lot of companies get really caught up and it's like, oh, we really need this as like an internal function. It's like you do at the time you can afford 3 employees. That's kind of the mark. I say when you can have 3 FTEs, that's when you bring in in-house. And guess what? I've already planned for that. So we hire for you. So we know the function. So we will hire for you and we will slowly offboard our scope of work.
That's
so
really
like we know so we know there's a limit. Like, I'm not stupid. there's an efficiency substitution cost where you get large enough where it does make sense for you to have internally. But anything below that, I can tell you we're probably more efficient and more cost effective.
I find that really fascinating. I don't think you very often hear about a business that has sort of like a planned out like offboarding process. I admire that, to be honest, because I think that's very realistic and it doesn't create like a weird relationship with your customers. You know what I mean? Like, they're going to understand that you're like fully on board. You're working with them and leading them to a place where they can do it themselves. That's pretty fast. Hey, we're taking a short break to tell you some exciting news. Chris and I wrote a book. Surprise! It's called Startup Different, the myth-busting blueprint for your multi-million-dollar business. And it's available now. Like our show, we're trying to pay it forward to our fellow entrepreneurs. The book busts 33 business myths, tells some of our most hilarious stories, and gives you many of our best tools to build, scale, and exit your business. You'll find the book on all major online retailers, including Amazon. Check it out. We think it's pretty great. And now, back to the show.
Yeah, and we ultimately will still get work. Like, at the end of the day, I know we'll still get work, right? Because we know the brand, we know the systems, we know the market. they're going to still give us fixed projects. So at the end of the day, it'll be a long-standing relationship. That's why I always tell my clients, I'm like, give me your budget. And they're like, we kind of don't want to give you. I was just like, I got to be clear with you. You're not giving me a budget so I maximize spends. You're giving me a budget so I can understand the constraint that I'm dealing with to hit your KPIs. Because if you're like, hey, Nate, you got 20 grand for the rest of the year. I was like, 20 grand for what? They're like, oh, well, the average CPA for us is like 100, blah, blah, blah. They'll go through the numbers. I'm like, so just, did you do the math when you gave me that number? Because at the end of the day, 20 grand on top of my retainer, you're not going to get much, right? Yeah. So I always tell my clients, it's like, give me your budget. I'll do a consultation with the team and I'll go, this is the realistic KPI. Are you okay with that? And they'll either say yes or no. And if they say no and they have investors, then we go back to the investor and say, hey, our goal by the end of the year is X. Nathan has told us we need Y. Here's his math. Are we okay with that? And then we're all in agreement. And then off we go. I get the budget. I manage the budget. I report on the budget and I report on the KPIs. If I don't meet it, you fire me. It's like any other employee, but with way more talent.
Yeah. More talent, good looks, other important things, right? But no, that's really a fascinating business though too.
It is interesting too, because I think that, when you, like for us, we were hiring into a space that we were not experts. Okay. Like I could hire developers and I could figure out if they were doing a good job and stuff like that. You could hire salespeople and know if they were doing a good job, but the marketing was kind of this gray zone. And I think it's really nice to be able to like hire where it's going to be people that know what they're doing. And that you can actually, it's probably a lot easier to let go of a vendor than to let go of an employee
100%.
or a couple of employees if it's not working out. So it's, I think that gets you a lot of credibility, Nathan, to be saying to people, yeah, like if we're not doing it, like fire us, that goes a long way. And credibility too, with like, I'm hoping that you grow to the point where you need to actually hire people and I will help you hire those people to take this in-house at some point. That's incredible. Yeah. I don't know. Would you have would you have wanted to do this if we were?
I would.
Rewind time.
I think maybe, yeah, actually, because it was always something that I felt like I was kind of like I kind of alluded to that I was kind of like half-assing it. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't. There's definitely more to be had there.
Yeah.
But I think it would have been helpful to have like people who know what they're talking about as well. Even just to build the foundations of your marketing department, which is obviously part of this process. Yeah. It just seems like it would have been a lot more beneficial. So.
Yeah. Nathan, one thing I wanted to ask you, just because you know this space, talk to me about organic, growth of your brand through like true organic, whether it's YouTube videos, whether it's social media stuff, whether it's that versus boosting and paid and all that sort of stuff. We kind of wonder, are we in an era now where it's virtually impossible to do it organically, that you just kind of have to plug your nose and boosts things and like, or can you still do it totally organically at this point? I feel like 10 years ago, yeah, no problem. Okay. Now, don't know.
So, yes, absolutely. And in some SaaS businesses that we've consulted, like they literally can't even have paid work because their CAC, their CAC ratio isn't even possible to meet like a level that's sustainable. So in some businesses, organic is the only way. And I think the one thing that I really stress to a lot of businesses, especially when they don't have experience in marketing, and I, again, privileged, lots of mature companies, lots of startup companies. So I've seen both ends of the spectrum. There's a reason why people preach omni-channel. And I hate that word because it's stupid. But really what it means is you grow your business by capturing a part of the audience of every single channel. And every channel has different parts of the total audience because everyone consumes information the way they like to consume. So I don't know, maybe one of you really enjoy Pinterest. So Pinterest has high impact and influence for you. Don't ask me why. That's just you. You're now a part of that audience, right? Now, should you start your marketing campaign on Pinterest? Probably not. But what's really important is in every business, there is the most practical and sustainable channel for you to go into to see success. And I find a lot about building a marketing function is really just a prioritization exercise of the highest probability of success. And,
Right.
and that comes down to how much money do you have and how much internal resources you have. And so when you say, hey, Nathan, is organic not possible? Well, it is if you have an amazing content writer. It is if your nephew or niece is like a rock star TikTok creator. So you've got that
Just
resource.
flossing and just
just crushing it. Right?
Is flossing still cool? I don't think it is. I think it's many years ago now.
So. But do you see what I mean? Like if you have access to the resources at an economic rate, you could make that channel. Now, is that going to be a channel that every single person would have? No. Ultimately, it's always going to come down to, is it practical? Meaning, can I execute on it well? And can I sustain it for a long period of time? Meaning, is this going to tax the living crap out of my business for too long? Right? Because whoever this resource is likely doing other things. So is it so taxing that this person just ends up wasting their time just on this? So I think organic will always work, but it's just a matter of probably one, your ideal customer profile, and two, your internal constraints in terms of resources.
Zooming back to our company for a second, I do think about how when we had the business, we always like to say we like to place small bets, and we would do this with marketing too. So we'd be like, okay, we're going to try, ads on this. We're going to try a blog. We're going to try, all that different stuff. I mean, back then, like inbound marketing was like all the rage and all that stuff. And so we tried that for a bit, and we realized it was just like so much effort for like almost no return in our target market. So, like we figured out some of that stuff didn't work. But I think that's kind of what you're getting at. It's like it's the best use of spend. It's your ROI. It's just your best outcome based on, the resources you have effectively.
Yeah.
So.
And I think going back to Nathan's point, we were doing B2B. We were selling to higher ed institutions, universities, colleges, that sort of stuff. And it was specifically the, chief of police, the campus
really
security.
Sexy part of the university.
Yeah, exactly. And so, there was just, like you mentioned, Pinterest. And for them, like we mailed like postcards to chiefs of police with ads in them. Okay.
And it worked.
Because we were the only ones doing that.
Yep.
And they apparently got mail on their desk every morning, and they were seeing stuff from us, and that actually worked. So I think it's a really good point that, it's really where your customer is that you have to focus your efforts, not like where, do it on this social media platform or this social media platform.
I still can't believe that worked, by the way. That was so crazy to me that I would get phone calls where they would be like, I got this piece of mail from you and I'm interested in a mobile app product. Like, what year is it?
Nathan, how often is like, mailing out postcards in the marketing mix for your clients right now?
I'm not. So guys, I'm not even joking. Your ICP just fell into a recent call of mine. And that was my suggestion. And it was funny because I said, you're lucky. And he's like, why am I lucky? I was like, these guys, your demographic, they're the only people still in the office.
Yeah.
These are government workers.
Yeah.
So you can mail them. Yeah,
it actually worked out.
He's like, really? I was like, why wouldn't you mail them? Because they're not picking up phone calls anymore. And email is getting destroyed by thousands of email accounts. I was like, you're lucky. You actually have someone who actually has to show up at work and actually has to accept mail.
That's so funny. Yeah, they're literally there. Like they have to be there. Yeah. It was interesting during the pandemic.
Now the goal is what is the actual creative strategy on that direct mail? So I did direct mail a ton before, and I would say, look, direct mail is great because you get to your intended person, but the question is, do you get the open and do you get the impact and influence and trust, which means, is your creative aligned with your brand and is it creative enough for them to care?
Yeah, for sure. That was definitely, you can get to them, but are you going to wow them? You know what I mean? Yeah. So very cool. Very cool. So I guess I wanted to ask one more question and then I'll ask you the question I ask everybody. But the one thing is too, I was thinking about your space, kind of thinking about your competitors. What is your market look like? Because I think this is kind of interesting. I've never really thought of, clearly Chris and I were not about to do this because for some reason we didn't get there. But what do your competitors look like? How are you like differentiating against them? What brings, what makes you win a deal over the next guy?
That is such a great question. And thank you for asking me such a terribly hard question, because I feel like every agency wants the answer to this.
Yeah.
I think when it comes down to it, it is specialization, and it's the ability to showcase wins. And I always say this, like, if you were to really simplify marketing, all my job is to do is really just to generate trust and give you enough trust that you get a desired outcome. And if I can do that via materials, that's marketing. And the way we do that is through my podcasts, so my interviews, my case studies, our work, our creative work, and our actual product, and referrals, right? But more importantly, I think it's also just network effects. I'm quite well known in different parts of the tech circle in Toronto, and so because I have such a saturation there, typically if you get 2 or 3 people saying your name, you're going to get the contract. And so the other thing that I really focus on is just actually like regional concentration. This is the one thing I actually talk about when I'm talking to a pre-revenue startup. I'm like, what's your spend? And they're like, we got $100,000. I was like, we're going to spend $100,000 in one city, maybe one part of that city. And we are going to saturate the living crap out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's how we differentiate. It's very specific, and it's honestly the same playbook as most people, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it's results driven though, right? Like the thing with a marketing business is like if you're driving consistently good results for your customers you're working for, you've got a good setup with them, good reputation with them. That's definitely going to take you to to your next deal, and the deal after that, and the deal after that. So okay, so one last question.
Same thing is like a vertical one. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. One last question for you today. So, what is one of the biggest like myths that you've run into about startups, or even obviously starting your own business, that would surprise people, or maybe would be helpful for some of our listeners today?
We talked about it just briefly before when we talked about organic and not organic working. I will say this because I was an affiliate media buyer, and when you do affiliate, you get to see a lot of data, and you start recognizing very small pieces of data impact conversion rates a lot. For example, the version of your Chrome, the wireless provider you're using, all of these things actually change conversion rates. And so when you do media buying, you actually come to this conclusion that any channel can convert. But it's the question of whether or not, do you have enough time and money to find the perfect funnel that matches the data and your creative assets to create that conversion? So this idea that, we've gone to trade shows, it's not converting, you probably got bad experiences and bad activations. My Google ads is not working, you probably have a bad lander, and you probably don't have consistent messaging. And the question is like, can you actually spend enough time to figure that out? And do you have enough runway to do that? So I challenge every company that says, hey, this is not working. It will work. I can actually promise you it will work. But do you have that runway to actually try to figure it out? That's the big question.
Awesome. Oh, very cool. Yeah. That's a good myth. That's a solid myth.
One of the better myths.
One of the better myths busted that we've got. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us today on Startup Different. Folks, that's another episode of the show. Thank you again very much, Nathan Yeung of Find Your Audience. Really appreciate the time today and the insight provided. And of course, folks, we'll have another episode next week. We're looking forward to it. And thank you so much for the time. Please rate the pod, and we will see you in 1 week. Hey, you made it all the way to the end of the episode. Nicely done. If you enjoyed this episode, like, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so the almighty algorithm can help others find us. Want more from Startup Different? Check out our book, Startup Different, the myth-busting blueprint for your multi-million-dollar business. Follow us on social. We're big on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. You can also check us out at startupdifferent.com. Special thanks for this episode to Graham and our friends at Toronto Podcasts. Visit them at torontopodcast.ca. See you next week.